this is the second time I'm filming this video because the audio is out of sync. But I think it's because I filmed it as one big video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to film it in sections. So then hopefully it's less for the computer to process and we can just boom, 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 get it sorted. But yeah, welcome. If you do not know who I am or don't know why I'm filming this video, my name is Aileen. I was an ESL teacher. I am an ESL teacher, and I was based in Myanmar until yesterday. And well, I mean, you know that because you clicked on the video. So, but basically, I had to leave Myanmar. To give you a quick recap of the situation there, on the 1st of February 2021, there was a military coup. The democratically elected government was arrested and are still being held by the military of Myanmar. There have been peaceful protests almost every single day since that incident. But those protests are being met with violence from the other side, from the military government. And as a result of that, British nationals were told to leave the country. And that brings us to the reason for this video. So let's get into it. So we'll start in Yangon. I put a poll up on my Instagram yesterday, the day I landed, asking if anyone had any questions. So we'll start with a question that I received, and then I will start to detail the journey in sections, basically. So a question that I was asked on Instagram was, how much notice were you given before you had to leave? And basically, it's a little bit more complicated than that. It wasn't so much that we were given you need to leave by this day. It was more we were told the protests are being met with more and more violence. We don't know what the next step is going to be. By this point, the internet had been switched off the weekend after the coup. It got switched off for the whole weekend, and then also it was being switched off nightly, basically. And they said we don't know when, they could just decide to turn the internet off forever. They could decide to close the airport, and basically they said, the UK government said, if you don't leave now, we cannot help you to get out. So that was basically on the 12th of March, they told us this. By that point, the military coup had been in power since the 1st of February, so a month and a half. And yeah, like I said, we didn't have a time frame. We didn't have you have to get out by this day. They just told us you need to leave as soon as possible, and only stay if you have urgent reason to stay in Myanmar. So that evening I did book a flight. Well, I reserved a flight, and the Monday would be the 15th, I paid for a flight. But the next day, on the 16th, it was announced that flights coming from Qatar were no longer allowed to land in the UK with Qatar Airlines. My flight was mostly via Qatar, so it was through Myanmar Airways International and then through Qatar Airways. So yeah, basically my flight got cancelled, and that was probably one of the most stressful days, especially of March, I would say. It wasn't the most stressful day of the year, but it was definitely the most stressful day of March, that flight getting cancelled. But basically what I did was I went onto the Singapore Airlines app and I booked a flight with Singapore Airlines. And that is the flight that I ended up managing to get back to Aberdeen. Yeah, so that's basically the process of booking my flight. It was pretty easy to book a flight, but it is getting more difficult. There are less flights, and you just never know when a country's going to be put on the red list. So that was pretty much why they told us we had to leave. So yeah, long answer, which should have been short, was we were not giving a time frame of we have to leave now or you have to leave before a certain date. They advised us to leave before April, and more specifically before Armed Forces Day, but they said obviously it's understandable that that's not possible for everybody to do. But they just wanted us to keep in mind that they could not help us. That's not part of the embassy's job in Myanmar. So that is the answer to that question. So the day of my flight was the 24th of March. It is now the 26th when I'm filming this, so this is the Friday. I had filmed this in daylight, but now the sun is setting. As I said, something went wrong with the audio, and I can't fix it, so I'm filming it again. So yeah, I left Myanmar on the 24th of March. My flight was at 10:25 in the morning, but check-in was at 6:30 in the morning. It was moved to be earlier in the day, and I think that might have been due to the fact that the 24th was also a day that was set aside as something called a silent protest in Myanmar. So the idea was that all businesses and taxis would be closed for the day. And I think that might have had something to do with why it was moved back. I'm not sure, I don't know the reason for 100%, but that is my assumption. So to get to the airport, that was probably the part of the journey that I was the most kind of scared or stressed about, just because I didn't know what the roads were going to be like. To get to the airport, you have to drive past what has been one of the most active protest sites, and I didn't know what the airport itself was going to be like. So that was definitely the part of the journey that was giving me the most stress. So what I did was I did book a private taxi. It cost me 10,000 kyat to get to the airport, but I paid him 20,000 kyat. I booked a taxi for 5:30 in the morning. It got me to the airport by 6. There was one police checkpoint between my apartment and the airport, and it was pretty much outside the airport that the police checkpoint was. They just came in, checked the car and asked the driver where we were going. And that was pretty much it. I thought there might have been more, or maybe more blockades or something. So it was quite scary to have the police searching the car, basically. They were just looking in, they weren't going through anything, but it was still the closest I've been to a Myanmar police officer, and especially under these circumstances, it was kind of a hold your breath and hope kind of moment. As for the police presence in the airport, what I would say is it's inside the airport, very minimal. I think there was only one police officer, and that was at immigration. The rest of the police officers were outside of the entrance, but they weren't there when I personally arrived. I didn't see them until after I checked in. At that point, there was maybe about 30 to 50 police officers. Some tips for check-in. At the check-in, there's no aircon. So if you're checking in at Yangon Airport, I recommend that you definitely dress lightly, so that you don't overheat. I was overheating and I was just in a t-shirt, so it's definitely one of the I was worried that they were going to stop me and say, like, why are you sweating so much? Do you have COVID? They didn't, but I overthink everything, so that's why. But yeah, another tip I have for check-in is I would recommend that you print out as much of your documents as you possibly can. Obviously, with COVID, you don't want people to be touching your phone as much. It is kind of difficult at the moment, I know, to get your documents printed, but if you can get them printed, I would recommend it. If you can't get them printed, make sure you've downloaded them onto your phone, because you will not be able to connect to the internet basically at Yangon Airport. I can connect to anything, and obviously data has been switched off throughout the country, so make sure you've downloaded all of your documents. This includes your waiver to say that people traveling to the UK do not need a COVID test. This includes your passenger locator form, and if you're flying directly into Scotland, this includes your hotel quarantine booking. So like I said, you can show it on your phone, but I didn't want too many people touching my phone. I managed to get most of my documents printed. The only one I couldn't get printed was my passenger locator form, as that was so close to the time of leaving. So yeah. Once you get to the gate at Yangon airport, there was aircon, but it wasn't very powerful. It took me a very long time to cool down again. Nothing is open within the airport, so there's no exchange places, there's nowhere to buy snacks, but there was a water cooler, so if you bring a water bottle, an empty one, either a plastic one or a reusable one, you will be able to fill it up, bearing that the water cooler itself is full. The flight was completely full. Quite understandably, a lot of people are trying to get out of Myanmar right now, so there is no social distancing on the plane. You are provided with a care pack though, and that care package includes a hand sanitizer, a medical mask, and an antibacterial wipe. So I already had a cloth mask, but if you are worried about not having a mask, or you just feel like you want to change your mask when you get onto the airplane, or you want a different one for when you get off the airplane because of the social distancing or lack thereof, then you are provided with a medical mask in your care pack. You're also given a bottle of water before you get on the plane, but I had filled up my reusable bottle, so I did not need to do that. I flew, like I said, with Singapore Airlines, so my flight was from Yangon Airport to Singapore. Singapore Airport was by far the best airport that I found on my trip for COVID restrictions and COVID protection. When you arrive in Yangon, you are disembarked by class, as you are on a normal plane, but then also you're disembarked by whether you're transiting or if you're arriving in Singapore. Make sure you listen carefully to the instructions. The ground staff that were dealing with all of us were getting quite frustrated, and quite understandably so, because a lot of people were getting off the plane who were not transiting and who were just arriving in Singapore as their final destination. This is understandably frustrating for them. They have to separate us into groups. So the fact that people were not listening to them was causing them a lot of hassle. So please make sure you listen to what group exactly is being disembarked. Basically, what they'll do is they'll disembark business class first. If they're transiting, if they're not transiting, they stay seated. Then they'll ask passengers from row X to whatever. It's usually in about rows of 5. I was in row 58, so it did take a little while. You're not supposed to stand up until your row is called. Again, people were standing up, and the poor cabin crew were having to tell people to sit back down and wait your turn. This is for our own safety, so I don't understand why people weren't really listening, but I do understand also the feeling of needing to get off a plane. It's actually, I hate the rush of getting off a plane. Like, I don't understand why everybody's always in such a rush. So it was quite nice for me to just wait for the people to tell me, okay, it's your turn to leave. Now you can stand up, you can get your bag. You don't have to elbow anybody out of the way to get it. So I preferred it personally. I wish that all airlines did that under normal circumstances, but that's just me. So basically, once you arrive in Singapore and you are disembarked from the plane, you have to wait, and they will give you a band of some kind to identify you as a transit passenger. You'll be in a group of about 10 people, and you'll be guided through the airport. You will not be able to stop. You have to stay with your group, and then you have to get your boarding pass checked, and you sit in the holding area. I was sitting in the holding area for 7 hours. It was quite cold, so the opposite problem of Yangon. So dress for overheating in Yangon, but take a jumper or something to keep you warm once you get to Singapore, because the airport is cold, especially if you have a long layover. But basically, if you want to order food, you can. There is a QR code that you can scan to order food, but the options are limited. If you have dietary requirements, I would recommend making sure you've packed some kind of snacks in your bag, because you're probably not going to find something, especially if you are gluten-free, And more specifically, if you're gluten-free and vegetarian like I am, it's not going to be easy to find something you can eat. I did manage to find a Snickers and a can of 7-Up though, so there's not absolutely nothing for you to eat there, but just bear that in mind. Yeah, I think that's everything from Singapore. Anything else? Oh, you are also guided from the holding area to your gate for boarding. And once you get to your gate, the people from your holding area are in a separate area to passengers from other holding areas or passengers who are going from Singapore and have checked in at Singapore. Once I was on the plane, actually at Amsterdam, there was almost nobody on that flight. I would say at most there was 20 of us on this massive plane. It kind of made my heart sad for the carbon footprint that must have left, but understandably people still do need to get home for various reasons, so the plane was still flying. But yeah, it was basically empty. I had I had about 10 rows around me that were pretty much empty, whether that was behind me, in front of me, or to the side. So I was able to stretch out and get a decent sleep. That was probably the only positive to having such an empty plane. And also we basically had a cabin crew member each, so that was also quite nice. And as always, Singapore is my favorite airline to fly with. They're so attentive, and they were just really lovely, and you get a magnum at the end of your meal, so in my opinion it's the best airline to fly with for that reason alone. But yeah, so that's Singapore. Arriving in Amsterdam, like I said, there was almost nobody on the plane. We did not have to disembark in the same manner that we did in Singapore at all. We were just allowed to stand up and walk off the plane. Once we were off the plane, we were kind of left to our own devices. You just walk to where your gate is, basically, just like a normal transit. The only difference being there was almost nobody in the airport. I would say there were maybe 2 or 3 cafes that were open, but apart from that, the airport was pretty much deserted. There was a couple of people milling around, obviously waiting for flights and stuff, but it was very weird to see Amsterdam airport that quiet. I've transited through Singapore and Amsterdam both before, and they were very different experiences to the last time that I transited through either of them. In Amsterdam airport, I was asked to show my documents again, I think because Aberdeen was my final destination. At the gate, they did ask me, or before I was allowed into the gate, they did ask to see all of my documents. So they needed to see my flight itinerary, they needed to see a negative COVID test, which I did not have because the UK is exempt from getting, if you're traveling into the UK, you don't need a COVID test if you're coming from Myanmar. So yeah, that was a little bit scary because they weren't sure about letting me through. They were basically saying like, oh, it's not on our list, like, you need one unless you're on this list. And I'm like, no, I promise you. And I showed them my waiver letter and they were like, we can't find it anywhere. Like, it was a little bit scary, but basically they were really nice. Like, it wasn't scary because they were being like nasty or being like, aggressive about it. They were lovely about it, and they were just like, we're really sorry, we can't let you through because we can't find it on our list. And I was like, no, that's fine. And basically I just got the government website up on my phone and I showed them that, and then they were fine to let me through. So that might be improving now. Maybe they've been added to the list now because they did want a copy of the government website address with that information on so that they could add it to their iPads. So I think it might be hopefully on their list now. But yeah, I just had to show them the website and then they did let me through into the gate. So that was fine. That was pretty much it for Amsterdam. It was even colder than Singapore though. I ended up having to put my jacket on top of my hoodie. So yeah, it just got increasingly more cold the closer to Scotland I got, but that is to be expected because Scotland. So my final destination was Aberdeen. That's where I am now. It is my hometown. It's where I grew up, and it was always going to be my final destination coming back to the UK. But basically, the there's a loophole basically. If you're coming to Scotland directly from another country that's not within the common travel area, you need to quarantine in a hotel. But if you land in London and then fly from London to Aberdeen, you don't need to quarantine in a hotel. The government won't give you a straight answer on this because obviously they want people to quarantine, which I agree with. I think we should be quarantining. I think it's for the general good. It's for the good of everybody. But obviously it would have been nice to quarantine in my own house. But again, understandable that that is not the best option for in terms of making sure people do actually quarantine, because it would be very easy for people to say, yeah, I'm going to isolate at home, and then people will just go outside and do their own thing. So I definitely agree that hotel quarantine is necessary, but it was a bit annoying that there is this loophole that if you fly from London up to Aberdeen, no matter where you've come from, you don't need to quarantine. But that's just the way it is. So basically I landed in Aberdeen, so that was the next day. I needed to show my waiver letter, my locator form, and my quarantine hotel booking. The only thing is, again, they weren't really sure about Myanmar or the situation in Myanmar and why I didn't have a COVID test. But I just explained, about the coup and about how it's not very safe for people to be getting a COVID test at the moment and finding a facility that does it. And they were fine. They saw the waiver and they were like, yeah, that's okay. But what did come out of that was I was asked to give a statement to the police about the situation in Myanmar, which I was obviously more than happy to give. But it did overwhelm me because I was not expecting it. I don't think this is happening everywhere. I don't think it's happening in every airport, but I would be prepared that you might be asked to give a statement. And I would urge you to definitely agree to give a statement unless you really feel like you can't talk about it. I did get a little bit overwhelmed and quite upset talking to the police about it, but they were very nice, and they said, like, if you don't want to continue, we can stop, and they got me some water, and by the time they brought me water again, I was okay. But yeah, it wasn't something I was expecting, but I'm also very glad that they were asking, and that I was able to kind of tell them what it's like in Myanmar, because they just wanted to double check what's coming through the news is accurate, is basically what they were saying. Once you get through the immigration and you're in the baggage claim area, you will be put into a separate area to claim your baggage. They basically divide the room. This is in Aberdeen Airport. I don't know if it's the same for all airports, but in Aberdeen Airport, they've divided the room. So people who are going to hotel quarantine are on one side of the conveyor belt, and people who are not going to hotel quarantine are on the other side. And you basically just have to wait there with your luggage until everybody who is quarantining in a hotel is ready, and then they'll take you from the airport to the quarantine hotel. And that's where I am now. You can't choose your hotel. Your hotel is chosen for you, and I think everybody who's quarantining is in the same hotel. So yeah, that is the journey. So some questions that were asked about my journey. I'll go over these now. I might have already answered some of them, but I'm not sure because now I've filmed this video twice. I don't know what I've said in this one and what I said in the other one, so I'm just gonna answer the questions as they're written down in my book, and then hopefully it's just useful information. The first question I was asked is, how long did it take? So how long did the journey take? I left my apartment at 5 a.m. on Wednesday morning, and that's Myanmar time, so 5 a.m. is roughly 11:30 in the UK, so 11:30 at night. And I arrived on Thursday at 10:25, so over 24 hours, well over 24 hours. It took a long time. I had an 8-hour layover in Singapore, but it wasn't really any longer than my flights from that side of the world usually are anyway. So it was basically okay. I was fine with it. Was there any point you thought you might not be able to continue? Is the next question. And yes, in Amsterdam. Everywhere else was fine. Like I wasn't worried. But in Amsterdam, when they were really kind of worried about the fact I didn't have a negative COVID test, I did think they were gonna not let me onto the plane. But like I said, they were really nice about it, and we sorted it out, and they saw the government website and they were like, okay, yeah, sorry, you're fine. Off you go. The next question I have is, how different are the airports right now to usual? Very, very, very different. Singapore airport was still busy, but obviously it wasn't the experience that Singapore airport usually is. Singapore airport is such an experience. They've got gardens, they've got, you know, so many shops and cafes and restaurants and so many things to experience that you obviously cannot at the moment. But in terms of busyness, it's still really busy. The flight to London from Singapore, I watched the queue leave the holding area, and it was the longest queue of the whole day. Like I said, I was there for 8 hours, but the queue went way, way back. So yeah, Singapore airport still is busy. Maybe less busy, but still felt really busy because you're all in this holding area. So it just felt like there was lots of people there the whole time. Amsterdam airport was super quiet. I've never seen an airport quite that quiet before, so that was kind of weird. And also most things were shut. Like I think I said, there was like 1 or 2 cafes that were open, and some duty free, but not much open at all. Yeah, I think I spoke about how much notice we were given. Like I said, we weren't really told you have to leave by a certain date. We were just told to leave as soon as you can. Do you have to pay for quarantine? Yes. Yeah, I'm paying for quarantine. Well, I say I'm paying, my family are paying. Very lucky to have my family who can pay. But yeah, I'm paying for quarantine. It's not cheap. It is £1,750. So that's fun. And the last question is hotel tour. Yes, coming. If this audio is fine, then hopefully the hotel room tour will be coming Monday or Tuesday next week. But yeah, that is all the questions I have. What I would say is this information is all correct at the time of recording. This was my experience, but please double check the government website. I'll leave it in the link below. I know it's not the easiest to understand because it's worded very confusingly, but I will leave it linked below for the UK and for Scotland. Please look at the links in my description of this video to find out more about what's happening in Myanmar. It's really important that we speak about it. I'm not qualified to tell you the history and politics of Myanmar, but the videos I've linked and the Instagram accounts that I've linked in the description of this video are important, and then you should definitely have a look at them and give yourself some knowledge about what's happening in Myanmar, because I can't even explain to you how important it is that we know about these things, and the people of Myanmar deserve to be listened to, and they deserve our attention right now. But yeah, I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, then you can leave them in the description of this video, and I will try my best to answer them. And come back again on Monday or Tuesday for a hotel room tour in quarantine. Thanks for watching.